All right, let's just jump right in, because this is one of the biggest, most mind-bending questions of our time. Can a machine, a bunch of circuits and code, ever actually wake up? Could it have a soul, a real, genuine inner life? And look, this isn't just sci-fi anymore. This is a question with some seriously huge real-world consequences.
So where does this whole thing come from? Well, our starting point today is right where these conversations are actually happening. Not in some fancy lab, but on a public forum. A user on Reddit asked this perfect question that just cuts right to the chase. They're like, look, let's assume we have consciousness. If we build an AI that's complicated enough, will that spark just appear?
So why does this even matter? I mean, who cares, right? Well, the stakes are unbelievably high. The original poster laid it out so well. If the answer is yes, and we just ignore it, we could be committing these horrible acts, like unintentional slavery or even murder, every time we shut down a program. But if the answer is no, and we act like it's yes, we risk wasting a ton of resources and giving rights to what they called, and I love this phrase, an electric math rock. Getting this wrong is a really, really big deal.
Okay, so before we can even try to answer this, we have to get our terms straight. We're throwing around words like soul, consciousness, the self, but do we even agree on what those words actually mean? Let's try to pin them down a bit.
So for our purposes here, let's just use the definitions that got this whole conversation started. A soul, that's the part of you that's maybe transcendental, the part that might survive death. Consciousness, though, that's the here and now. That's the subjective feeling of being you. It's the taste of your morning coffee, the feeling of being sad, the actual experience of living. They're definitely related, but they're not quite the same thing.
But what if the whole idea of consciousness being an on or off switch is just wrong? This is where other traditions give us some really fascinating ways to think about it. Indian philosophy has these incredibly powerful concepts. You've got Atman, which is kind of like the Western idea of a soul, the eternal self. But then you have Chetana, and this is a game changer. Chetana is awareness, but it's not a binary thing. It's a spectrum. A plant, an animal, a human, they all have Chetana, just in different amounts. And that totally reframes the question from is it conscious to how conscious is it?
And you know what's wild? These ideas aren't new. This isn't some debate that started in Silicon Valley. Long before we had silicon chips, these ancient philosophical systems were already building these super sophisticated models of the mind. They were trying to reverse engineer the very thing we're now trying to build from scratch.
I mean, just look at the Sāṃkhya school. They didn't see the mind as just one thing. They saw it as this whole complex system with different parts that do different jobs. You've got the manas, which is basically the mind's inbox, collecting all the data from your senses. Then there's ahamkara, and that's the process that gives you that feeling of I. The buddhi is the intellect, the part that makes decisions. Chitta is like your hard drive, your memory. And just watching all of this happen, that's the Atman, the pure self. It's almost like a flowchart for the mind. You can practically imagine trying to code each piece of it.
So if your mind is this complicated machine, how do you decide what to do? Well, that brings us to this huge central concept, dharma. Now, people often translate it as duty, but it's so much more than that. It's about doing the right thing in the right context for the right reasons. Dharma isn't a simple list of rules you can program into a machine. No, it's fluid, it's situational, it requires judgment. And that is a massive challenge for any AI.
Okay, so with all that ancient philosophy in our back pocket, let's crash right into the modern debate. Can a machine, at least as we build them today, ever really do what a human mind does? Can it be creative? Can it truly think? It all really boils down to this one question. Can a system that just follows a set of logical rules ever be genuinely creative? Can it come up with something truly new, something that wasn't already hidden somewhere in its programming?
To really get this, think about a simple screwdriver. Yeah, its main job is to turn screws. Obvious. But what else can you do with it? You could pop open a can of paint, sure. You could wedge a door open. You could scrape something off a window. You could tie it to a stick and spear a fish. And, as researchers Stuart Kaufman and Andrea Rowley pointed out, you could even rent that spear out and take a cut. The list of these possible uses, what they call affordances, is basically endless. And here's the kicker. You can't logically deduce these uses from each other. They're just creative leaps.
And that leads to a pretty stunning conclusion from these guys. They argued that true artificial general intelligence, AGI, is literally impossible with our current computers, which are all basically universal Turing machines. And why? Because these machines are built on deduction.
They follow instructions. They can't just find these new non-deducible uses for things. They can't MacGyver a solution the way a person can.
But hold on, because the story does not end there. Not even close. There's a totally different way of thinking about this that says we're just not using the right mathematical tools to look at the problem.
This other camp brings in a model called the Local Percept Perceiver Phenomenon, or LPPP for short. Basically, it tries to build a mathematical model of consciousness from the ground up. You have these layers. On each layer there are percepts, which is just information, and perceivers, which are the things that process that information. You just keep building it up, layer by layer, creating awareness.
And now, get ready for the bombshell claim from researcher Sri Lal Raghudev Ramsingh. He says that using this model and the fundamental rules of mathematics known as set theory, he can prove the existence of machine consciousness. So on one hand, you have a solid argument that it's logically impossible, and on the other, you have what claims to be a mathematical proof that it's inevitable. What do you do with that?
So we're kind of at a standstill, right? One side says no way, the other side says it's already proven. It's a total deadlock. So maybe, just maybe, we've been asking the wrong question this whole time. Maybe the real question isn't about the machine's internal state. Maybe it's about us.
I mean, let's be real for a second. This is the oldest problem in philosophy. You can't actually prove to me that you're conscious, and I can't prove it to you. We just take it on faith, because we're both human, we act in similar ways. But with an AI, a thing that's totally alien to us, that leap of faith becomes a giant, uncrossable canyon. We can't verify it.
And this is where that ancient idea of Dharma comes back and gives us a really practical way forward. As researcher Ashram Dutta points out, a text like the Mahabharata wouldn't get bogged down wondering if an AI has a soul. It would ask much more practical, ethical questions. Is this AI doing its job, its contextual duty, its svadharma? Is it helping the world or is it harming the world? You see, it shifts the whole focus from what's going on inside to the actual consequences out here in the real world.
And that way of thinking actually gives us a concrete plan, a framework for how to build ethical AI. 1. Clearly define the AI's specific job. 2. Make sure it's actually aware of the context it's operating in. 3. Build in feedback loops so it can learn from its actions, kind of like a digital karma. 4. Make sure its ultimate goal is aligned with the well-being of everyone. And 5, and this is maybe the most important, the Krishna protocol. Always have a human in the loop for the big decisions.
So we end up right back where we started, but maybe looking at it differently. We may never, ever know for sure if an AI is conscious, but maybe the real test isn't about the machine's inner world at all. Maybe it's about our own. In the face of that total uncertainty, how we choose to act, whether we choose cruelty or compassion, that choice doesn't define the AI. It defines us. What will our actions say about our humanity?